There we go. That's us recording now. So hi, everybody, and welcome to the Autism Understanding Scotland's webinar on creating neuro-affirming guides. And as ever, I always want to know if I'm at an event, who is this person? So for those of you who are joining us for the first time, my name is Marion McLaughlin. I am the CEO at Autism Understanding Scotland. I'm a qualified teacher. I spent a long time working in classrooms, which means a lot of time putting together things like social stories for autistic children. I am one of the spokespersons for the Scottish Government's Different Minds campaign, and our next phase of the campaign is coming out end of next month, the beginning of April, that kind of time. Cannot wait to show everybody. We've been working really hard on it. You're all going to love the next phase. I am late diagnosed autistic myself. Next month will be 5 years since I got my official autism assessment, and I'm planning on celebrating hard because I'm really excited about that. And I'm also the parent of an autistic child as well. So when a lot of our other colleagues at the organisation are kind of similar, being autistic and having lots of professional experience of working with autistic adults. And some of us are parents of autistic children too. So we come at it from loads of different angles. But what's tonight all about? So we're going to have a look at what is a social story and what were kind of some of the benefits and some of the problems that people had with social stories. So why we're moving away from them. We're going to have a look at some examples of, bad practice. And we're going to have a look at some advice for neurodivergent affirming stories instead. To sort of have an alternative to them. We're going to have a look at some really good examples of neurodivergent affirming stories and have a look at some, have a bit of a Q&A as well. So for a little bit of background, because it's useful to know sort of where these things are coming from. Back in 1991, so quite a wee while ago, Dr. Carol Gray came up with the notion of social stories, which were designed specifically to support autistic people of all ages. And it was a learning tool that was really intended to support social understanding, to help navigate unfamiliar situations. And the idea was to help reduce anxiety and uncertainty. And there was very strict certain criteria that was given in order to be considered an effective social story. And it was supposed to be very individualized. And sometimes you could use sort of different, you could take it a step further for some of the more advanced learners, but there were so I was really quite strict instructions over what they could look like. However, while the philosophy behind them can be sound, social stories are often used completely inappropriately. And we think as well that some of the philosophy behind it as well isn't quite as nuanced as maybe the autistic community needs. Our understanding of autism back in 1991 was very, very different from our understanding of autism now. And because of that, we've really got to move along with the times and with our understanding of autistic people and what it is that they need. So some of the common problems with social stories as people use them at the moment, a lot of them are really generic and mass-produced. So rather than having a look at the individual and what the individual needs, how the individual is getting supported, that's not taken into consideration. Some people will go online and they'll say, right, here's a social story for that, maybe modify one or two bits and then pass it on, even if they do that. And that's not actually the way that these things were supposed to be used. Sometimes people will use them to modify or control the person and ignoring their experiences. We've seen, we're going to see some examples of, poor social stories and why they're problematic. And they're having a look at making the person appear neurotypical, behave in a neurotypical way, and not taking into consideration the sensory experiences, the communication differences, not taking into account, any other aspect of what's going on with the autistic person. And that is really quite damaging. Sometimes they have been aimed to teach responsibility for how they are treated by others. So you are getting bullied because you are different. That's why you're getting treated this way. And if you stop being so weird, you won't be treated in this particular way. Now, we've seen some social stories in the past that have been very much like this. So if you stop talking about trains all the time, other people will stop bullying you. And we are not responsible for our innate autisticness. Is something that is glorious and wonderful and beautiful, and it should be celebrated. It is not something that should be quashed so that others don't mistreat us. Other people mistreating us is not our fault, and it is not something that we should be blamed for. And social stories have been used for that in the past. Social stories have often encouraged people to mask their being autistic. Now, there's a lot of conversations around masking and unmasking, and I think it's a really huge, big, complicated issue. Last year, we ran a masking and burnout webinar, and it sold out incredibly quickly, and we ended up putting on a second one, which sold out even faster. So we put on a third one, which also sold out very, very quickly. And it's one of the reasons why we upped our Zoom account so that we could get more people into the room at the same time. I think that it would be very sensible for us to consider putting on another masking webinar at some point soon, because it's really not as simple as masking is bad, you have to unmask. There's a lot of nuances that go along with that. But with a lot of the social stories that we've seen that have been given out to children and adults, and a lot of it is around, you behave this way, but actually you should be behaving that way. You've got to use quiet hands, you've got to stop verbally stimming, you've got to do the next thing. And it's encouraging autistic people to mask things that they really should not have to be masking in school, that they shouldn't have to be masking in, like care centres and other places, that it should be free for them to be doing these things. It's not hurting anybody. Sometimes they've been used to teach people to seek approval or obey authority figures. Now, with my own demand avoidant profile of being autistic, I really struggle with the notion that I'm supposed to be obeying authority figures blindly. I don't think that I should be doing that. I think that if anybody thinks that they have authority, then they should be like, why do they have that authority? Why should I be obeying you? What gives you the right to be telling me what to do with this? Why do I need to seek your approval? Why does seeking approval from somebody matter so much in this? So a lot of these are questions that I would naturally have as a demand avoidant autistic person. If somebody wants me to respect them, then they need to give me a good reason for respecting them, and they've got to show me respect back. I'm not going to respect somebody just because they're my teacher. I'm not going to respect somebody just because they're my chairperson at the charity. I'm not going to respect someone just because someone tells me that I should. And I don't expect my staff members to respect me just because I'm their manager. I expect people that if they are going to respect me, they do it because I've shown them respect, I treat them respectfully, and that I've earned their respect. And a social story telling me that I have to respect someone isn't going to cut it for me. Social stories have also been used to dictate how they are supposed to feel and why. So I have seen some social stories, and on occasion things like conversations, which would be a whole other webinar, that's all about this person does this nice thing, so you're supposed to feel grateful. And if it's literally just this person is doing their job, I don't need to feel grateful for that. I don't. That is their job, right? That is not something that I need to be feeling grateful for. And I'm allowed to have my own feelings. All autistic people are allowed to have our own feelings. And we're allowed to have feelings that might not be what other folks expect, because we might operate in a different way. We might have different sensory experiences. We might have, differences in how we're communicating. We might have differences in how we want to spend our time. And we're allowed to be having different feelings about something that other people might not expect us to have. So dictating how we're supposed to feel and why, absolutely not okay, but we have seen this quite a lot. Other social stories have gaslit autistic people and very much minimized their experiences. So it could be something like, I am going to eat my lunch. It is not going to be too spicy or too hot. Maybe it is too spicy for them. Maybe it is too hot. But telling them that their experiences aren't real is actively traumatizing. And this is something that we see quite a lot. Another thing that we've seen sometimes is, I will be okay making this transition. Well, do you know what? Maybe they will, but maybe they're going to feel anxious. And that's not validating their lived experiences. So we can't minimize what actually is happening with them. We need to be open to the fact that they're going to be experiencing some things that you might not experience, and that's actually okay. We should never, ever encourage suppression of discomfort or distress. If we are distressed, it is okay that we're distressed. We are distressed for a reason. And we should not have to stop our expression of distress because it's upsetting somebody else. If someone is distressed, we need to look at the cause of that. What is the root? What was the trigger? What's happened that's made that person distressed? And your crying is really hurting my ears, stop it now, is not the right thing to be saying in a social story. It should be, you should be recognizing that that person is distressed and there's a cause behind that and dealing with that cause rather than just telling them they have to stop being distressed. And that's something that we get a lot as autistic individuals whenever we're growing up, being distressed and other people not understanding why that is. And that can be quite triggering for an autistic adult who's consistently had those experiences when they're young as well. So that's why some of them have worked out quite badly. And we've got some examples here of bad practice. And we have to thank Neuro-Affirming for getting them. And I'm really loving that Neuro-Affirming have put in their own responses to these things as well, because I think that's brilliant practice. So here we have this young person next to another. I will make good choices when I have something to say. I will keep my hands, voice, and feet quiet if it is not my turn to talk. Yeah, I can see some folks shaking their heads with that. Yeah, but the reality might be that I fidget when I'm nervous or overwhelmed, and this is called stimming, and it keeps me from becoming too anxious. But I am being told that it is distracting. The more I make myself hold still, the less I'm able to focus. The teacher says I am making a good choice when I don't speak or move. I guess that means being invisible is better than learning the lesson. I cannot tell you how many times I've gone into schools and other places and I've seen them have little lanyards around their necks and little pictorial cards that say things like, fold your arms, hands still, this kind of thing. That doesn't work for a lot of autistic people. That is not being neuro-affirming. It's not supporting them in their development. Anybody who's seen me sort of give a training session when I'm in person will have seen I'll walk about, I will rock backwards a little bit, I will use fidget tools. I don't sit still because I find that really, really difficult to do. So even though I am sitting at the moment, I'm moving around, I'm getting sensory input from various different places. And these things help me to focus and they help me to concentrate. And this is a really good example of a terrible story because we're not supporting, we're not affirming that person's neurodivergency. We're not encouraging them to use the tools that they need in order to access the lesson successfully. So it's a barrier. This little social story is a barrier to success rather than a pathway to success. And that's something that we definitely want to be avoiding. And Neuro-Affirming, they've done it again. We've got another one from them. When I listen to my teachers and follow their rules, they feel happy with me. I feel happy too. Well, why should I feel happy that someone is happy with me? maybe my reasons for feeling happy should come from somewhere other than external validation. Maybe my own internal validation is going to be an awful lot more important. That's, and as a parent, I definitely don't want my child to only be feeling happy whenever he's making other people happy for him, conforming in a way that he's not comfortable with. That's the last thing that I would want. So loving the neuroclastic response to that. So when I listen to teachers and don't seek clarification, I don't always understand the rules. When I ask questions, they seem annoyed. If I don't ask, I get it wrong and they say I wasn't listening. They think I am not listening when I'm trying hard to understand. I get approval for pretending to understand, and I'm supposed to also pretend to be happy when they cause so much anxiety. I don't know about the rest of you, but I was definitely that child in the class who asked questions and made the teacher annoyed because I was asking questions. And I was also that kid who sometimes the other classmates would come up and they would say, thank you for asking that question. The teacher didn't cover it and I wanted to know the answer too, but they were too worried about asking a question because they would get told that they weren't listening. But my lack of a filter meant that I had to ask it because I needed to ask all the questions. As an autistic person, I have to get all the information that I need. And a lot of the time I need some clarification. And sometimes even as an autistic adult, I'll know the answer to something, but I might ask the question anyway for comfort. So I might know that I'm having katsu curry for dinner, right? I might know that, but I might still ask that 3 or 4 times just to get the comfort out of doing that. And it means that I know exactly where I'm standing and it makes me feel an awful lot better. And I think as well, that whole notion of listening, how do we show that we're listening to somebody? I am listening to somebody when my hands are busy, when I'm moving around a little bit, and when I'm able to put my gaze where I'm most comfortable. I am not listening if I am sitting on the floor, if I am looking directly at the teacher, if my arms are folded, if my back is stiff because it's all straight. I am not listening at that point. I am barely surviving at that point. So it's not helping that neurodivergent person to be neurodivergent successfully, to allow them to flourish, to allow them to be their own individual self. So this is really problematic with this one. It's very much minimizing their experiences. It's encouraging masking. It is not neurodivergent affirming at all, this example. We have one more example of bad practice. Yeah, I'm really not very fond of this one. So we've taken out the child's name in this one. I'm going to call them Dan. The child's name is not Dan. I just like the name Dan. So there we go. Sometimes Dan has to go to the doctors. That's okay. Mum or dad will come to the doctors with Dan. The doctors and nurses may need to touch you. That's okay. Dan must not hurt the doctors and nurses. The doctors and nurses are here to help. Everyone will be happy if Dan is a good boy. Well, where the hell is Dan not being good in that story, right? What on earth is going on that we suddenly need to remind Dan to be good? And what does good even mean? In that instance, good is this completely intangible notion. What is good? And good in one area might be not good in another, and that might be really good in a different. What is good? This story means absolutely nothing to me as an autistic person, right? Someone said Dan has to go to the doctors and that's okay. That is fair enough. Mum will come with us and that's okay. The doctors and nurses may need to touch you. Maybe that's actually not okay to Dan. Maybe that's going to be sore. Right. So maybe Dan has hurt some doctors and nurses in the past. Maybe this is why they've come up with this story. But why has that happened? Were their needs communicated? Were they listened to? Were they supported? Were the doctors and nurses explaining what was going to happen beforehand? If Dan said stop, did they actually stop? Or did they carry on? Did they give Dan multiple ways of saying stop? So there's lots of questions that I have here as an autistic person. Yes, the doctors and nurses are there to help. but are they helping Dan in the way that Dan needs to be helped? If Dan had lashed out at the doctors and nurses because they were distressed, that doesn't mean that Dan wasn't a good boy. It really doesn't. That means that Dan was a distressed boy. And there is a big, big difference between someone being naughty or bad or not good and someone who's being distressed. And that is not taken into account anywhere in this story. And that's really stigmatizing that distressed behavior. To me, if I was a child and I read that and that was aimed at me, I would be thinking, oh my gosh, the meltdown that I had the last time I was at the doctor's was bad. I'm bad for doing that. I can't do that again. That's just encouraging me to mask. And what qualifies me being good? I don't know what qualifies me being good. I'm very much a believer in kids do well when they can. So if we give children the tools that they need in order to do well, they're going to do well. Kids only don't do well whenever there's a missing skill, when there's missing information, when they're not quite mature enough to do something, when they're not ready to take that developmental step. Not because they are willfully choosing to do something wrong. It's usually something much, 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 much more complicated behind it. And that is really what's missing out of these social stories. Who is this child? What is their brand of autism? How do they present it? How do they need to learn? How are they most comfortable in this world? How do we make them feel good about themselves? All of that is missing. And that's why these social stories are so problematic. And that's why so many autistic people, so many parents of autistic people, when we hear the word social story, that's why we start using swear words, because they've not helped us out so much. That's why we feel that lurch in our stomach. So as always, we always want to know, right, this hasn't helped. What can we do? Okay, so an ND, a neurodivergent affirming guide, has got the flexibility to meet the needs of the autistic person in a way that works for them and validates who they are. So this is a much more affirming approach to them. So let's have a look at that. So what are some of the benefits of the neuro-affirming guides then? So they can give you some information and we will give you lots of examples. We'll give you several different examples so you can see what they're going to be like. So they're given information in an accessible way. They can help to support memory. So if you're trying to teach something new, it can help support their memory as they're going through it. They're there to help to lessen uncertainty and anxiety. You know, as an autistic person, if I don't know what's happening next, and after that, and after that, and after that, that does increase my anxiety. Having a plan for the day, the week, the evening, the bells, New Year's, all of these things help to make my anxiety just that little bit more manageable. So a neurodivergent affirming guide can help to lessen anxiety around the unknown. A neurodivergent affirming guide is written in collaboration with the autistic person and their family, so that everybody who uses the guide has an insight into the autistic person's experiences. So while the guide, the primary purpose is to support the autistic person, one of the really good secondary sort of things that can come out of it is if it's written properly in collaboration with the autistic, it's going to help you to understand where they are coming from specifically. Now, as an autistic parent of an autistic child, I do have quite a good insight an awful lot of the time, but I'm not a mind reader. And sometimes things will come out that I maybe hadn't considered. And by doing guides like this together, it gives me more of an insight into this particular little person so that I can adjust my parenting, my practice to suit them even better. Sometimes it can provide access to common knowledge or information. A lot of autistic people have got a lot of really good specialized information. And sometimes some of that common knowledge that other people just automatically pick up as they go along, I mean, maybe you don't always pick all of that up quite as easily. So sometimes neurodivergent affirming guides can give you access to that sort of information too. A good neurodivergent affirming guide can be accessed as needed. So it's not just something that you write, you maybe stick in a folder and you leave in a classroom. It's something that you have access to any time that you're needing to get access to it. So it maybe needs to be stored in a variety of ways so that it can be pulled out and used anytime. It can sometimes be used to help break up complex skills and concepts into smaller parts. And we can have a little bit of a look at that as well. So, for example, this isn't one of the examples that we've got, but learning how to cook can be quite a complex skill, but it can really break it down and give like, look, here's a step, and then here's the next step, and then here's the next step, and then here's the next step, and then guide very gently along. When I look at, for example, a recipe, and I see that there's 13 different steps to it, part of me can go, that looks complicated. Maybe I'm just going to make something that only uses one pan instead, right? But if I can sort of take that time to sort of, sit back and gently go through it, that makes it an awful lot more accessible. And if I can say, right, maybe I'm going to print this out, but I'm only going to look at one page at a time, that can make it more accessible. So chunking things into a little bit. It can also help to build self-awareness, self-confidence, self-esteem, and it validates autistic lived experience. All of those bad examples that we saw were really brilliant at invalidating lived experience of autistics. I mean, if you want to make an autistic person feel bad about themselves, those are really good ways of going around about it. Please don't ever do that. But a neurodivergent affirming guide should be the antidote to that. It should be helping people to understand themselves that little bit better. So it could be helping them to understand that when the bell goes at school, that is an unexpected bit of sensory input, and sometimes unexpected sensory input can increase my anxiety. Right, okay, now so that can help them to understand where they're coming from. Then my next question after that is, why does the school still have a bell? Let's address that issue. Do they still need it? Probably not. So it can help everybody to understand where everybody's coming from, but especially the autistic person. Because very often, if you're an autistic youngster, it's possible that nobody's actually sat down and spoke to you about what being autistic means to you specifically. So have they actually said to you, let's explore your sensory differences. Let's explore how you play and why that's different to some of the other children in your class. Let's explore why you are utterly fascinated by fire engines and the other kids aren't to the same extent as you. So sometimes it can help explore their own brand of autism, their own flavor of autism, and then put that into context and then help them to understand concepts that are based on that. But they should be helping the autistic person to feel good about themselves, not making them feel worse for difficulties that they've had. So how do we actually go about creating them? All right. So as we've said, we need to create it with the individual to match their own needs. So you have to have a think, why are we doing this, and getting them together. And since it's got to be created with the individual, you do not want to be doing it at a time that they're feeling dysregulated, tired, hungry. You want to be making sure that they're feeling like they're in a good place, that they're able to communicate effectively, either with mouth speak or text or, pictures, however it is that they communicate, and make sure that they're in a position that they can contribute to this guide as much as they want to. Right? You've got to acknowledge and validate their experiences. So you've got to make sure that that's part of what's going on in this guide. Is this making them feel good? Is it making sure that you're having a look at their feelings? Is it making sure that you're looking at how they perceive the world? Is it working with their communication style? Is it working with their sensory differences? It's got to be created in format that they can access easily. Pretty much every social story that I've come across in a school setting has been a book. Okay, it's been a story where there's been several pages that they go and they flip through. And for some autistic children, that's perfect. That's spot on. Some, I've not seen any created by a school ever that didn't have pictures to go along with it. And for some autistic children, that is perfect. Not every autistic kid needs that. And it's not been individualized, and it's not necessarily been aimed at their reading level. It's not necessarily being done in a way that they like. Some autistic people would far prefer a video where it could be you and the autistic person sitting down and having a chat and recording yourselves doing it. And for some folks then, that could go onto their phone, it could go onto a device that they've got access to regularly, and they can watch that video anytime they want. And that might be a far better way of producing a neurodivergent guide for that person. I know one fantastic parent who created a song for their child when they were toilet training. And it was just brilliant. Danny needs to use the loo. It's time to go for a poo. And, you know, it was lovely. Song is how this child interacted with the world. It's how they understood the world. It's how they communicated with the world. So anything that was helping him to learn new skills, the best way to do it was through song. And if it was through song, it was something that was going to work with him far better. I have never seen anybody else creating neurodivergent guides through song before, but I really think that it's an underutilized area and definitely something I would love to see more often. And having heard me sing like 2 bars, I'm sure you don't want to hear me sing again, but for other folks, it's lovely. It's a really beautiful way of exploring the world. The content, the format, and on the tone are given as much description as required. It is meaningful in that it's given the information that is required, and it is a safe space for them, that when they look at it, they're going to feel good, because other ones that we've created, as we've seen, they don't necessarily. It acknowledges the strengths, the achievements, and where the person is in terms of their development. So it says, here is where you're at. You're really good at X, Y, and Z. Let's see if we can get you onto this next stage here. And we'll do it collaboratively. And it's tailored to support the individual ability, learning styles, and interests. So it's using those. It can be, it doesn't have to, not every neurodivergent guide has to, but it can be really good practice to use that person's interests, to capture them, to bring them into it, and to get them really engaged in this particular guide. It is having a look at their own abilities as well. So for some, if they're really good readers, it might just be a list of sort of instructions or a list of words. That might be how it's done. If it's somebody who's not reading, then it could be some pictures. If they love photography, it could be photographs that they've taken themselves. If they love art, it could be art that they've created themselves. And with their learning style, as we said, it could be all around what it is that works for them. So it's not thinking about, this is how I think this should be. It's, where are you at? Where are we coming from with you? The guide has to be patient and supportive. So it shouldn't be, I need to learn this by this time. Autistic people develop in our own way, and many of us have got a really spiky developmental profile. I was one of those kids who was reading books before I started school, able to spell like far more complicated words than my peers were. You know, my nickname in primary school was Dimple Dictionary, because I've got a big dimple on my chin and I could spell everything. But I got a D for art in primary 1. My art skills were not as developed as my reading skills. And for some people, they got quite frustrated, because how could I be so much here in one area and so much there in another? And it just took time for me to sort of catch up. By the time I got to primary 6, I came 3rd place in an art competition, and I was really excited, because I finally felt validated that I could actually do art a little bit better than my P1 teacher had thought that I could. So that helps. But understanding where they're at and validating that can be really useful. A lot of good neurodivergent guides have got a backup plan. Now, I, as an autistic person, I love having a plan. I love knowing what I'm doing, but I also need a plan B. And a lot of the neurodivergent affirming guides that I create at home have got, here's plan A and here's plan B, so that if we can't quite do plan A, that's all right. We've got a backup. We know that we've got something else that we can do instead. So it's not the end of the world if plan A doesn't happen. We know what can get done next. It can answer the relevant questions: who, what, where, when, why, where appropriate. So not every guide is going to have to answer all of those questions, but some will want to answer some of them, and that's totally okay. It needs to be introduced and implemented appropriately. Now, when we say introduced, it means this person will write it with you, will create it with you, however it is, and then you might want to leave it on the shelf for like a few days for them to have a think about it before then putting it into practice. So it's working with them about when it's going in. So for example, if you are creating a guide on toilet training for a little one or a bigger one, writing it one day might be more than enough, right? You might not want to start toilet training that same day that you're creating that neurodivergent affirming guide. You maybe want to give it some time. And it needs to be implemented appropriately. So again, with that person, in collaboration with them. Works with their presentation of being autistic is so important because, as I said, there are some autistic people for whom having a lot of structure is really, really important. But there are also demand avoidant autistic people for whom having a lot of choice and control is really important too. So I know some people who've used social stories, for example, or neurodivergent affirming guides. I would hope that they're using now as well for telling their kid what to expect at bedtime. So we're going to have dinner at 5, you're going to have a bath at 6, at 7 o'clock, you might, go and use the toilet. 8 o'clock, we might watch a TV show together. At 9 o'clock, it's bedtime. But for some autistic people, we might need to switch that up a bit. So you've got all of these different things that you're going to do, but maybe we can watch the TV show first, and then we can have a bath, and then we can maybe do some reading or go for a walk because we want to do something differently. So it's giving them that choice and control around it. So some neurodivergent guides might be a little bit more rigid because that's what the person wants and needs. And some of them might be incredibly flexible. So it might not be X, Y, and Z is happening. It could be X, Y, and Z are going to happen, and they're going to be in any order that you want, and it's totally up to you. So it's not being too rigid. But again, we've kind of covered this already. It gently helps all parties understand each other. But I think the main thing is it's helping that autistic person to do whatever it is that the guide is there to help them to be doing, to support them. If photos are required, real where possible is good practice for most people. But again, got to be really, really flexible with that. See, we were talking earlier about in the organisation about that social story for Dan going to the doctors. The wee potato heads might work really well for some people. I don't know many people for whom it does work well. So, and I see some shaky heads there as well. So I'm really glad it's not just me. If I was creating a social story like that, and I have created some neurodivergent affirming guides for this sort of thing, try to use real photographs where possible and have that autistic person in the photographs where possible as well. And sometimes we've used role play to create that guide too. So for example, if it is that person going to the doctors, can we have somebody dressed up like a doctor? Have we got a toy stethoscope that we could be using to indicate that that person is a doctor? Can we be role playing what the doctor is going to do? If the doctor is going to be giving them a vaccination, do we have like a toy injection that we can be given for that as well? So using pictures and using role play sometimes in that creation can be really, really helpful for taking some of that anxiety away. And I certainly know that for a lot of autistic children, when they were going for, COVID tests where they had to swab themselves, having it practice at home sometimes where they didn't have to actually use the swab, where they could just pretend that they're using it, That sort of thing can be really helpful when kids have been getting the flu vaccine, sort of with a little puff down the throat, using something that's empty rather than got the vaccination in it to practice. That sort of thing can be handy. And if you're doing these things already, taking photos and then using them to create an ND affirming guide can be really useful, and it can save you like duplicating effort all over the place. And role play for a lot of kids is how we explore the world anyway. So using that natural play that they're doing, capturing it either on film, on camera, sort of voice recordings, all of these things can all help to be part of an ND affirming guide. And if it's stuff that they're doing anyway, how useful is that? Okay. So where do you really start? We've given you loads of advice, right? So you're about to start writing your guide. You've got all of these principles. Have a think about what the purpose of the guide is. So why are you creating it in the first place? You want to introduce a new skill. Is it to develop an existing skill to aid a transition? Is it going to help you to understand a new situation? Like, are you going to a wedding for the first time? Are you going to a funeral for the first time? Are you going to Auntie Susan's new house for the first time? Is it their first time going to a birthday party for a long time? So it's, what is it helping there? Is it to explain why something is important? Is it to explain why we need to brush teeth on a bit more of a regular basis, potentially? Is it to explain why it's important to make sure you've got fruit and vegetable in your diet so that you don't get constipated? What is that purpose? Is it explaining why we might feel how we feel? So it might be exploring those emotions and those different ways that we express them. We are hoping to come and do a webinar looking at autistic communication in a couple of months' time. Really looking forward to that. But autistic communication can often mean that our facial expressions don't necessarily match how we're feeling. Sometimes our tone of voice might not match how we're feeling. The other day, I was having a meeting with some colleagues and I was quite stressed and I was tired. So I was very monotone, and sometimes I was just sounding downright sarcastic, and I really wasn't feeling sarcastic. So I did say to them, I'm not sarcastic, this is just how I'm feeling. And it actually was absolutely fine. But sometimes exploring why we're doing these things and exploring that autistic identity, those natural autistic feelings, can be really useful at times and help them to validate who they are. Okay. They absolutely should not be, and I think we've covered some of this already, shouldn't be used to change someone's behaviour. Our behaviour, the outside behaviours that you see, happen for a reason. Every single time. I have lost count of the number of times somebody has said to me, oh, they just kicked off for no reason. This happened for absolutely no reason. There's always a reason. There is consistently a reason behind these things. If you want to have a look at why somebody is doing something, you've got to have a look at, right, what happened beforehand? What happened 2 hours before? What happened the day before? What happened the week before? And to really do that deep dive into that person and what their motivation for doing that thing was. And then that's how you tackle it. Not by using a story that tells them, I feel sad when you do this, so don't do it. You're feeling sad about it isn't going to change my behavior. You're helping me to change the circumstances that led to that behavior is going to change that behavior. So you've got to change something potentially rather than me. It shouldn't be used to stop stimming. I don't think I've stopped stimming all day, and stimming has helped me to concentrate. Stimming has helped me to focus on what I'm doing. It's helped me to focus on what other people are saying as well as what I'm saying. It's helped my memory retention. It's also just been good fun. It's helped me to regulate my emotions. It's helped me to regulate the sensory input. All of these things help me. And if somebody is in an environment where it is not unsafe for them to be stimming, where they're not going to be put into active danger because they're stimming, then don't stop them from stimming. They might need to be doing that in order to be in that space. Help them to stim it in a way that is safe so that they're not harming themselves, for sure, but don't stop that And if they are harming themselves because of stimming, then have a look. What is the purpose of that stim? Why is that stim happening? Are they doing it because they're distressed in some way? Is there something that they're getting out of it? So are they needing deep pressure? Are they needing sort of vocal input? What is going on with it? So again, it's about you doing that deep explore of why that stimming's happening. And also stimming can sometimes just be good fun. More than anything else, sometimes it's just good fun. Should never be used to encourage or force someone to conform or adopt non-autistic behaviours. It's okay to be autistic. I mean, I think we've kind of said this a few times already, but it absolutely bears repeating. It's absolutely fine to be autistic. And autistic behaviours are human behaviours. They're things that everybody does to some extent. Sometimes the extent to which we do them is just that wee bitty more. That's okay. It should never be used to suppress our autistic identity, discomfort, or communication. Our authentic autistic communication style is beautiful. And I think it's some of the clearest autistic, or the clearest communication that you can get from anybody is whenever you're with an autistic. My discomfort is not something that I should need to suppress either. I wouldn't be expecting anybody else to be in an environment that they found uncomfortable, that was causing them distress. So I don't want to be having to suppress my discomfort in a place either. It should never be telling people how they should feel. So I will feel happy when I have done X, Y, and Z. No, you're allowed to feel however you want. Sometimes it might be the end of something that's big and exciting. So for example, after our Chloe Hayden event, yes, I did feel happy, right? But I also felt relieved that it was done. I felt pleased that it went off without a hitch, and that Eventbrite did give out the link for it for that time, unlike this evening, right? I felt a huge, massive range of emotions. Happy was just one of them. I am a complicated human being. I'm not one-dimensional. I'm allowed to feel all of the feelings. And if someone tells me that I shouldn't be feeling someone, then that's just going to make me feel very annoyed at that person who's telling me how I'm feeling. And again, it shouldn't be telling us that we're responsible for how we are mistreated. So we've seen some, if I behave this way, then I will get 10 minutes in the sensory room. And if I don't, then I'm not going to get it. If that child needs 10 minutes in the sensory room to help them regulate, they get that 10 minutes in a sensory room to help them regulate. It doesn't matter whether their behaviours has met your standards for good, whatever that is. If that's something that they need, then that's something that they get. And if they're not getting them, if you're actively withholding something that they need, then that is really problematic. So it should be helping them to recognize who they are and what kind of things we should be expecting from other people too. All right, let's see some examples of some good practice. I have to give a big, big thanks to Joel Stewart, who was the creator of Abney and Teal, who very, very kindly said that he was happy for us to use these pictures this evening. This is a book that one of our members of staff created for one of their children to support them in learning how to use the toilet. This does not meet any of the well, it doesn't meet very much of the criteria at all for a traditional social story, but it worked beautifully well as a neurodivergent affirming guide. It was written very much in collaboration with the child. They were able to sort of say that they wanted this story about this particular character. Oh, I think, is that me getting a cup of tea? Thank you very much. And it was all very much taken from this particular child's interest in these characters. So they were able to say which character was their favourite, which one they wanted to be learning how to use the toilet. And the family were able to use a book where you were able to slot in the characters into different spaces on the page and help them to move around. The child helped to create that little nappy that the character is wearing, and they also helped the family find a bit of pick art for the toilet too. So you will get a copy of the slides, but it says, it's a bright and shiny day on the island, just right for trying something new. And this is exactly how every episode of Abney and Teal started. It's exactly how every book starts. It's a something and something day on the island, just right for, and then, you know, the words were adjustable. So hello, Neep. Neep wears nappies, but Neep is growing up. He doesn't want to wear nappies anymore. He wants to wear pants like his friends Abney and Teal, and just like the wee Toot who was wanting to learn how to use the toilet. Neep is a bit worried. He's always worn nappies, and using a toilet is new and different. So that's recognizing where this particular child is at, how he's feeling, and about how, you know, using a toilet is new and different, and that can be a bit anxiety provoking. Don't worry, Neep, says Abney, and Teal tells him, we'll help you. So that's letting the wee Toot know they're not on their own. They've got some friends. Other people are here to help. So they show Neep the toilet, and Neep tries on some big boy pants. He likes the purple ones the best, and Neep feels like a really big boy. And that was something that was very important for this wee one, sort of feeling like they were growing up. That's their choice, their words, what they wanted. Neep needs to pee, so Abney and Teal take him to the toilet. He sits down to have a pee. He thinks, this is very different. Neep likes being dry. He pulls his pants back up and washes his hands. It's fun to flush the toilet. Well done, Neep. So that's celebrating. You've done something new. You've done something different. You're recognizing where you're at. Well done. You've done really good. Abney and Teal give him a sticker for being such a big boy. Neep feels really happy. And the sticker, again, not everybody wants stickers for these things. This particular wee one did. They made that choice. That was entirely up to them. And I know some families where, you know, they might sort of do something else for that, but using that toilet for the first time, that's a really big thing. Bob blows some bubbles for Neep. Bob is very good at blowing bubbles, and they all play with the bubbles. But Neep needs a poo now. And the child was very involved in this, using their own language there and adding in that little bit of sense of humour, because this wee one was quite cheeky and sort of wanted to put in something. It's okay, Neep. If you can pee in a toilet, you can poo too, said Teal. And Toby Dog plays a going for a poo tune. Toby Dog would always play a tune. I'm hoping that other folks were Abney and Teal fans, because I'm loving Abney and Teal here. Neep sits down on the toilet to poo. When he's finished, he wipes his bottom and washes his hands. He likes flushing the toilet again. He likes not having a dirty nappy. Neep is really proud to be such a big boy. Well done, Neep. That was an adventure, wasn't it, Abney, says Teal. Yes, it was, replies Abney. And again, that's how every story finishes. That's how every episode finishes. So that it was all really familiar characters, familiar situations. It was very much affirming where that child was, where they wanted to be, very, very much led by them. And I am told that this is a book that this wee one still reads years onwards, because they were so proud of taking part in this. So very different from a traditional social story, but very much neurodivergent affirming, working with that child, working with their and working with their interests as well. Okay. Here we go. We had that terrible doctor one for Dan earlier, didn't we? So here's something that might have been a lot better for Dan, our fictional one as well. If I'm hurt or ill, I might need to visit a doctor or a nurse with my mum and dad. This might be at the GP surgery or at the hospital. And again, rather than having potato heads, we've got some real life people here who are much easier for a lot of us to react to. That's much more real to me than the tatty heads are. Okay. There can be sounds and smells that I don't know. I can use supports to help me. Ear defenders, or smelling mum and dad's t-shirt. There really is nothing, when you're a wee one, nothing like sort of cozying in with your family and sort of the smells and everything that's all associated with that. And ear defenders, if you can tolerate using them, can be such a good support as well. Sometimes using a device can help me in the waiting room. A game or video can give me something to focus on. So again, that's sort of recognizing that waiting can be difficult and giving that child tools to cope with that situation. We can't change the fact that waiting in the waiting room is difficult. We can ask surgeries to potentially do something different. There's only so much that they can do. Sometimes we're just going to have to wait whether we want to or not. So giving them the tools to cope with that really does help. The doctor or nurse may need to touch me when they examine me. They want to help me and make me feel better. I don't like being touched, and it's okay to feel like that. They will tell me what to expect and try to make it quick and easy. And again, it is absolutely fine not to like being touched. For some autistic people, being touched can be incredibly difficult, and telling us you're okay when actually we're really not okay is not okay. That is gaslighting. That's not affirming where we're at. So I love that we've managed to take that and sort of switch it around. And it's okay to say to a doctor, I don't like being touched, but it's also okay that they maybe do have to touch us. But having them tell us what to expect and getting that over as quickly as possible, what a difference that makes. Okay. Here's another one that another member of staff created for a member of their family. They don't really need to have pictures. Sometimes they will have, but sometimes they don't need it. So with this one, today I'm going to the science centre with my mum. So it's very much from that person. I'm writing it. I'm in charge. This is me that's leading the way on this one. We will leave the house at 10 a.m. I can follow the route on my phone in the car, so I know how long the journey will take. And I know quite a few autistic wee ones. And to be honest, me as an autistic adult as well, if I've got the route, even when I'm going somewhere that I know where I'm going, I find that really helpful, partly so I can have a wee competition with the route. So, you know, see if I can find a better way sometimes, but also give me an idea of how long it's going to take. If there's any traffic jams, then it can show up. So that can be really useful. When we arrive, I can play with lots of exhibits. I might have to wait for someone to finish playing before I can have a turn. I can use another exhibit while I wait. The exhibits belong to everyone. And I know that for some autistic youngsters, the notion that something belongs to everyone, if they've maybe been used to going at a quiet time and they've been the only one, that can be a little bit tricky. And sometimes they might want to feel a sense of ownership over something. Totally understandable. But there's that, I understand that I might have to wait. That's okay. Here's what I can do while I'm having to wait, so I don't get frustrated. So it's giving them choices, giving them options. If I need to use the toilet, I can go to the accessible changing room. I don't need to use the hand dryer. I know lots of autistic kiddos who love going out, love going exploring, love going to new places with their families, but really, really, really struggle using toilets because of the hand dryers. The hand dryers can make a lot of places really inaccessible. And I visited a business for some training a couple of months ago, and the only bathroom that had a hand dryer in it was the accessible one, which I found hilarious. But also that I found that kind of problematic. And I did raise it with them. How come this is the only toilet that you've got that's got this in it? Why? Who made that decision? Was it done in conjunction with the other disabled people? What was going on here? But reassurance that there might be a hand dryer, but if there is, we're going to stay away from it. We don't need to use it. Can be really handy. If we get hungry, we can have a snack in the cafe. So there's that choice and control. We don't have to go to the cafe. If we're having loads of fun playing with the exhibits, we don't need to. If we do get hungry, then we can do that. So again, it's not really prescriptive. It's about that choice. It's about that control. We'll leave at 11:45 a.m. so we are home in time for lunch. We can leave earlier if I want to. So then this particular youngster can sometimes get a little bit anxious about making sure that they're home in time for their meal times, which they do like to have at specific times. So that reassurance, if we leave, then we're going to be home in time for this. So then that helps them to relieve that anxiety, so they're not constantly worried. how long is it going to take? We know how long it's going to take. We've got it here. We can leave earlier if I want to. So again, choice and control. In the afternoon, we are going to play video games with Dad, which is very much a favourite activity. So that's given them, again, lots of choice, lots of control. And if they decided they wanted to do something different, it could always be added in as well. So this looks, again, very different from a lot of traditional social stories. But as a neurodivergent affirming guide, it's all very much led by this young person. It's taking their own experiences into account, where they want to go. It's addressing their specific concerns, and it's helping them to be in this place. Okay, so last couple of key takeaways. ND affirming guides can be as flexible as required to meet the needs of the individual. You don't have to be following a very strict set of criteria. It's just about what is going to work for this person in the way that's going to work for them. And again, work with the person, allow them to lead the way. We know some families where the youngsters who need an ND affirming guide are the ones who write them themselves. They're the ones who go and grab the pad of paper. They write down what it is that they need, and they'll get some support from the family as they're doing it. And their family can talk them through to make sure that all of those questions are covered and that it's done in a way that's going to work with them and who they are. Make them as accessible as possible so they can be used as required. Don't just laminate them and then leave them in one room. If the kid's got to take them everywhere, take it everywhere. If it's got to be on sort of little bits around a lanyard, put it around a lanyard. If it can be photographed, so then it can go onto the phone so they can access it anytime they want, do that too. Never use them to encourage masking. Always be celebrating, affirming that autistic identity. One of the most protective things that we can do for our mental health as autistic people is to be accepting that we're autistic, working with the fact that we're autistic, embracing our autistic identity. If we don't do that, we are much bigger risk of poor mental health. These neurodivergent affirming guides are just one way, one tool that you've got in your belt for helping autistic people to feel really good about themselves, who they are, how they interact with the world, where they want to be going with their lives. And it's going to have that massively protective effect for them. And the more that we can say, you're being autistic is okay, and we're working with that. In fact, scratch that. It's not just okay, it's brilliant, it's beautiful. I was doing some training earlier on today, and one of the things that sort of raised a couple of eyebrows was whenever I said that being autistic has enriched my quality of life in a lot of ways. And I honestly, hand on heart, believe that it has, and I believe that it continues to do that. I believe it will continue to do that forevermore. And that's something that we need these youngsters to see. We need these autistic adults to see. We need everybody, whether they're autistic or not, to recognise that being autistic can enrich our quality of life. We might need some different things. We might operate in a slightly different way, but we can learn what those ways are and we can work with them. And that, my friends, is what a good neurodivergent affirming guide can do. And I think that's probably a really good place for us to stop recording. So.